Okay, so this is a through hull that I just took out of the boat. I ground off. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take you over there first, and then we'll talk about this guy. Okay, so here's the where that through hull came through. This was the outflow from the holding tank and the head. And most through hulls, when they're put in a boat, they have a flange on the outer side, and then they stick through to the inside, so that when you torque it down from the inside, that flange and whatever the flange on the inside and this flange on the outside gets squeezed together, and they hold really tight on this. This, for some reason, I don't understand. It's not like Pearson's cheap, but this through hull had no backing flange. It was just a pipe that came through the hole of the hull. You see the threads here, and the only thing that held this whole through hull in were the threads. Now, I hit the Jesus out of this thing with a hammer, and those threads held very tight, so it was a tight hold, but it's just an odd way of going about it. There's a couple of other things on that through hull that bother me, and I'll show you in a second. But I'll tell you the other another three that I just ground out. So these three are in the, I have no idea how much wind noise you're getting. I'm gonna wait till it pauses. So these three through hulls, I went the cheap way. I didn't bother like trying to unscrew them from the inside and deal with that. I was just, screw it. I just ground off the outer flange. That's why I did all of them, and went up top and pulled them out. I'm gonna have to, all three of these are disappearing. So all three of these through hulls are gonna end up getting ground back maybe about out to this far. Then I'm gonna have to come back in with epoxy and fiberglass and build all that right back out to make it fair. But this one here was, I think, the drain for the sink in the head, and this was the intake for the head itself. And this monster over here is the through hull for the depth sounder, and it's the biggest hole in the boat. And it just strikes me strange that we need to put a hole that's what, is that 1.5 inches in diameter? Actually, in one of the thinner portions of the hull forward, for instrumentation. There's got to be a better way, and maybe there is. Maybe they're smaller now, or maybe I'm just being naive. But so there's those three, and then in the back, aft in the boat, there are two that I got. There's one. This one here. This was the raw water intake for the motor, the engine, which I don't need anymore. This is a small one. I like small holes. You got to put a hole in the boat. And then there's two back here, one on this side and one on the other side of the boat. And these are for the drains, the cockpit drains, the scuppers. And I don't love, look at how thick though. Look at the layup on this thing. It's a hefty hull. I mean, I ground the hell out of this. I'm only halfway through. What is that, a 1/2 inch? 3/4 inch? That's impressive. But I'm not sure if I screwed this up or not by grinding it out when I should have probably hit it with a torch and tried taking them out so that I could use the same holes. Or I'm really tempted to find a way where I can drain the cockpit and don't have to go through the hull at all, just reducing the number of holes in my hull. That hole is going to stay, because that's the hole for the prop. You can't do anything about that. There's another hole up here. Can't do anything about that for the stern posts, right? You need those. But I don't necessarily need ones for the drains. Maybe I don't need one for that instrumentation. I probably do though. But it seems like there's gotta be a better way. That hole that you're seeing right there, that's the exhaust for the engine. I pulled that out. It's above water line, so it's not as critical. But, and this little guy here, which is clearly not a well done hole. This was there's a little bilge pump, and that's the bilge pump outflow, and I'm not crazy about the way that was done. Clearly put in after the boat was built. But I'm gonna take you back over to this guy. And so there it is. You can see that there was no flange on the bottom of this. These threads, just simple pipe threads, went into the hole and were cut off flush. And look at how big this thing is, though. All of this mass was held to the bottom of the boat by just this. So that's one problem. Not crazy about it. No flange on this side. Nothing to hold it to the boat. Just bad design. And then a gate valve, right? So there's this getting whacked and maybe knocked and pulled from the hull of the boat. And then there's the idea that if this hose broke, then the only way to shut off all this water flowing up into the boat would have been through this stopcock, which is a gate valve. Now that would have flowed. It would have flowed right here, and that's the nasty. That's the poop out. And this here is the drain. I don't remember what the hell that's for. What can that be the drain from? That's the drain from the head. Would that be the drain from the sink in the head? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know what that was. So anyway, it's all gone. I don't need it anymore. So, and the other through holes are sort of scattered around the ground. Here's one. This is one of the ones that was forward. I ground the flange off and it just popped right off. These bolts here for that flange were screwed into a piece of plywood that was glued to the hull. The plywood was completely rotted away. But even still, there was, at least on this one, there was a flange on the outside of this holding, sandwiching that to the hull. Here's another one. You can see this one had the rotted plywood, but it's all glued in. And then none of these can turn, by the way. There's not a chance you can turn that stopcock. That's why I gotta get rid of them all. This was the raw water cooling intake for the engine. Again, no flange that attaches, or not a real true stopcock. So there we are.